Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Crocker with you again on Chapter 4 of Warriors, Hard Chargers, and Patriots, connecting the little dots to the big dots. Tonight we're going to talk about that sense of urgency that goes with being a good leader so that your people have opportunities to be as great as they can be. You'll recall, and I think it was session 1 where I talked about the fact that you can't be as great as you want to be until you know who you are. So part of this challenge is to making sure that you set people up so they continually learn about who they are. And as of course, as they do that, they're going to basically, we keep moving that goalpost to the right because greatness will be redefined as they go along. And when I talk about greatness in this particular sense, I'm not talking about trophies or awards or a plaque on the wall. I'm talking about greatness in terms of how you live your life, how you do your job. You know, how are you a great parent? Are you a great member of your church? Are you a great person in your workplace? I mean, in terms of getting your job done and helping others get their jobs done. And you know, there are a lot of people who come to us from various walks of life who never knew who they were when they went to boot camp. And maybe they hadn't yet figured out who they were when they got to your first command or your first office space if you're in the civilian world. But it's something you have to help them figure out, because if they don't get that part of it done, then they can't establish a vector to this greatness piece. My contention is that, you know, that doing something great is something that, you know, we can sort of set the timeline on. We should, as leaders, we want to create that perfect time and that perfect place and the perfect environment, opportunity, what have you, so that people can do something that makes them feel good and makes their organization as a whole flourish because of what they did and what they or how they contributed to a team, which is just as important. You know, what I've always told people that work for me is don't stop growing, and I'm going to talk about a couple of people as we go through tonight that will be living, breathing proof that people didn't stop growing. They you know, they got to one level of greatness, if you will, reestablished who they were, and went off and kept marching on. It was the way they had to go do this. I think that it's always been important for me that people always have worthwhile pursuits, because if they don't, if the little dot doesn't seem to matter anymore, then their emotional and intellectual capacities are sort of, you know, put into a state of comatose. They're just treading water. They're not moving forward. They're not moving backwards. They're not doing anything. It's not to say that you have to move forward every day, but taking a break once in a while, I guess, is permitted. But you don't want to get used to it. You don't want to sit there and just rely on other people to push you forward. If you do that, you're going to run into people who have different motivations and different interests. They might actually want to put themselves in your place and just sort of let you just sort of sit on the sideline, and of course then they get the benefit from that. You know, we don't make excuses. We never have made excuses. I always told my folks never to make excuses. Rarely did I ever see an excuse. Sometimes they had legitimate reasons why they might have taken a detour for a while. But you know what? As leaders, we wouldn't let them stay on that detour for very long. We didn't think that that was the way we wanted to go do this. So, you know, that's what it's all about. I told them never ever take your greatness to the grave with you, because there's a lot of great ideas that are in the graveyard because people just never failed to go ahead and work these pieces. It was just not what they wanted to go do. I want to talk to you about a couple of people, and I'm looking at notes because I've got so many people I've talked to over the last couple of days. These are people who've achieved greatness when they never even knew, when they never thought it was possible. The first is a young man who was in gangs most of his younger life. His family, his whole extended family were in gangs, selling drugs and doing whatever other things that gang members do. It was not a very healthy tribe. You know, they wore colors and they wore their signage, but it wasn't the kinds of colors that we had on ships where people wore jerseys to represent where they were working, or a sharp uniform that had their name tags on it, so that we all knew who each other was. It was a completely different kind of gang, if you will, a completely different kind of tribe. Mr. Gomez, he watched his family have some serious problems and serious challenges, real serious challenges. I won't get into the personal part of that because it's not my place. But what I want to do is accentuate where he came to, where he came from, and where he went to. Here's a young man who decided at a very young age that he was going to become responsible for his girlfriend and for the subsequent family, and he took the Navy as a way for him to get his act together and become a hard-charging, constructive member of our ship. He went on to work on his higher education. He got I think he first got to the Navy. I'm not recalling. I don't think he had his GED, but he got that first. Then went on for higher education, and he really wanted constructional discipline. And as I'm talking to him now, some 25 years later, this young man's got his act together, and he and his family, 2 young children, beautiful young children. I've not met them, but just listening to him speak, I could tell you that, I think one is 25 years old and one's 21 years old right now. And they're both, so they've learned about honor, courage, and commitment from Mr. Gomez. They've learned about all the beautiful things that go on with life if you are accountable to yourself. And I don't know what stories this young man told his kids or his family, but I do know that just in my talking to him, that I learned so much more about where this young man came from. And we're going to talk about this as well in terms of, when do you learn this? When do you have time to learn it? And I'm learning some of it right now. And for the Secretary of the Navy, I would suggest to you that there's a lot of challenges you have right now where you're trying to figure out why people are having suicidal ideations and other maybe retention issues and challenges internal to the Navy. There are a lot of people from your past, that have great stories to tell about where good leadership mattered and where not so good leadership also mattered. So I've got a suggestion on how you can handle this, but it's not going to be handled via a social media platform, and it's not going to be handled via a survey. It's going to take some good hard grunt work to go out and find out what made these people tick, what kind of leaders made a difference, and what were the things that they were looking for. The second young man had a lot of problems in high school. He had a series of parents and other relatives who were in the service, so they had a little bit of a service background to his life. And so there was all of this thing going on, but he was always living by second chances. He needed second chances or he would have not made it through boot camp. He had a lot of challenges with his first great job in the Navy. He made a little bit of a perturbation, if you will. It certainly wasn't an act of malfeasance, but things didn't work out to the standards that were expected. And I was in the middle of that because I was one of his customers. But at the end of the day, he and I, we took care of this. We got an understanding of this. Now, he still had to go back and do a different job, left the job that he was in, but it didn't slow him down. He made a mistake. He understood the mistake. There were perhaps some people in the chain of command that might have overreacted a bit, but at the end of the day, he was being held accountable, and he understood what he was responsible for. So this is a really important part of this. He was good enough in his job. He was in the hoteling service, if you will, of the Navy and the supply department, that this young man went on to run a major condominium development in California. So he's not waited, and he's not made excuses, and he's gone to look for that greatness. Even with that perturbation, he didn't let that perturbation get in his way, and he continues to excel. He's got 5 children, and in my conversation with him today, I will tell you, or I guess it was a couple of days ago, they're all learning from their dad. They're so proud of him, and he's very proud of them. And it's just, he remembers being called a force multiplier while he's in the Navy. He loved that term, and I suspect he's using that with his kids and his spouse and everybody else that's around him in his workspace. Another young man came to the Navy because he had some certain motivations that he wanted to fulfill, somewhere along the line, he ran afoul of some of the legal people, the military police, and end up, his honor from his perspective, and I don't discount I'm sure he's telling the truth, that his honor was tarnished in the way he was treated, and he felt like he just needed to get out of there, and he went home. He unauthorized. He went back home. Told his mom what was going on. His mom early, and it was just he and his mom. I mean, there was no dad in the equation. It was he and his mom working hard to keep the family together and food on the table and what have you. And so she let him at an early age start making decisions and being responsible for those decisions. And in this case, his decision was that he was not going to come back to the Navy. His mom, just was there to support him in this. His words was she wasn't happy with it, but he made the decision and he had to live with that decision. Well, there was a division officer who you'll get to listen to and talk to, maybe just listen to. We'd love to have you talk to him, who I've known for many years, was with me on Carl Vinson for 3 years, almost 3 years, worked a variety of jobs, had a whole bunch of different people that were that were looking to him for leadership and guidance. And to this day, by the way, this man and others are still getting that leadership and guidance. And so he was, so the division officer called the house, talked to his mom, convinced his mom to get this young man on the phone. And the conversation was something like this: you're going to come back to the Navy one way or the other. The best thing for you to do is come back under your own will and walk out back into the ship, and then we take care of it. We'll figure out how it goes. But we know it's not going to go well if you don't come back on your own. And those two had a trusting relationship. Trust again plays such a key piece of this. And he came back. Went to captain's mast, which is our non-judicial punishment. I can give certain punishments for different types of things. There were 12 or 13 charges against this young man. And after listening to the chain of command on both the people that wrote him up and this division officer, I had to make a command decision. This is where you try to give people second chances and give them room to grow if you think there's potential to grow. Now, this could have backfired on me, and if it would have backfired on me, he would have paid a consequence for it. And he knew that. That's what I told him. And he also knew that I wanted to give him this room to succeed and be great. So we suspended a whole bunch of those punishments and got him back to work with the promise and understanding that he, this was it. He had no more second chances. You only get 1 or 2 second chances. That's why in my life you only get one. That's why they call them second chances. Young man got out of the Navy, was married, has 2 young children. They're loving parents. He was respected in a lot of different things that he does now. Has a great job, and again, a role model for these young men and women. And I think that that's pretty awesome, actually. So I want to. So there's let's go to the next example here. There's an officer that worked for me while I was on Carl Vinson that I every time I talk to him, I go, why didn't I know what I now know? This goes back to my pledge or plea to the Secretary of the Navy, Chief of Naval Operations, anyone who wants to know what makes these young sailors tick. It's hard to learn it real time. But there's plenty of living, breathing examples. Sailors are sailors, whether they're generation, whatever they are. And they respond to leadership. They respond to the mission vision plan. They respond to the oath of enlistment. They respond to all of those incitements that make them understand what great is being about in terms of service to the country. And we should explore that a lot more. This young man was a 38-year Navy sailor. Started out as a non-designated airman in E1. Was in Wisconsin during the Vietnam War. He had a draft number of 15, which meant that he was certain to be drafted into the war. And he decided that he was going to take take it under his own control and joined the Navy because he didn't want to join the Army. And the Navy had a 3-year program that was basically set up for him so that he could go do all the wonderful things that he wanted to go do. He that was 1972 when he joined the Navy. He went to boot camp as a 20-year-old. Went to the Oriskany for his first tour. This is the first time he was ever out of the state of Wisconsin, and he was probably 20, 21, 22 years old. He variety of different jobs all the way up. He kept doing, here's the key, and this is what I tell all my people, even to this day, that work with me or that I can counsel. Look for those folks who are the good counselors, the people that really do have your interests in mind, and ask them for their thoughts and their ideas. And should you do this or should you do that? 9.9 times out of 10, you'll get good, solid, constructive answers. And this is what this young man did. Not so young anymore. It's just a little younger than I am, so I guess they could still call me a young man. And he went to a variety of different commands. He was at the Recruit Training Command twice. He worked with the Blue Angels. He was a flag writer for a couple of senior admirals in the Navy. He was all over the place. He did just a tremendous number of things. By 1983, he was already a chief petty officer, so that's 11 years after he joined, and already selected for a limited duty officer, which was his path to becoming an officer in the Navy. All of these things happened in a very short period of time. He was running hard. He wanted to be great, and he wanted to have the job that he had in Carl Vinson, and that was to do whatever was required that enabled everyone else to do their job. That became his byline long before he got there. For example, when he came back to the Recruit Training Command the second time as a commander, or maybe a lieutenant commander, he organized various aspects of this so that all of the divisions within the Recruit Training Command itself. It's only 8 weeks, so you got a lot to learn, and part of it is, organizational issues, how you have to rely on each other to be successful. It's not about just the parts; it's about the sum of all the parts, being greater than the whole, right? And so he was fully engaged in this. He started a unique, novel evening called Pizza Night. And you go, well, what's a pizza night? Well, pizza night in this particular case was an opportunity just the night before graduation, after they had just busted their rear ends for 8 weeks, to basically get to talk not only with each other in a very casual environment, but there were a lot of senior officers and senior civilians that were invited to this dinner to sit down and just have a conversation. The pizza was just, sort of a charade. It was really the conversations that were had. So I was back as a guest speaker twice. The first time I was back as a flag officer, and I was sitting down next to the honor graduate, who was also from North Dakota. I have my North Dakota State Bison sweatshirt on, and go Bison. And so this young man, who was not as young as the others, he was 27 years old. And he had been at Ohio State University. He had greatness written all over him. He was, following an academic pipeline. He knew sort of where he wanted to go along the line. And he got to a point 3 years into his Ohio State time that he had this burning desire to make a difference in the world now, not next year, not 2 weeks from now, but now. So he elected to put his education on hold and wanted to become a Navy SEAL. Now at 27, he had to get a waiver to do this, and that's what he did. And not only did he get accepted, like I said, he was the honor graduate from his class. So this was no slouch. So those types of things were not in place. But here's a man who's now been in the Navy for 21, 22 years, and he's figuring out the things that we needed to help others be great. So just the way he was. So I'm going to fast forward because his story goes on forever. And by the way, he is going to be, if I get my act together here, I've got an interview with him that I just completed. I've got to do a little chopping because it went a little long, because he's just a great man to talk to, and you'll love him. So he's going to be part of that. But so I just went through his program, and he basically did that. His whole plan was to do it, just like I said, it was to do whatever was required to enable others to do their job. So we had this 8 o'clock thing that I talked about in chapter 2. It was a evening meeting every night, 6 o'clock. All the senior commanders and captains who were various department heads and other key players, and the executive officer, captain usually didn't go, but the executive officer led it. And here's this Navy commander who, by intent, chose not to say a lot, but listen, take notes, pass other notes to other people subliminally. He was one of these mavens. If you read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, you'll understand what a maven is, and that are people who have the art of delivering messages, receiving messages, and getting them to the right people at the right time. It's dependent on trust, and it's dependent on exacting conversations in terms of what are the key points that have to come out of this. And that's what he did for a living. And he kept, and every night, there'd be, he'd watch me, he'd see what I was doing, he'd take notes for me. Not because I needed a note taker, but he wanted to turn those into useful pieces of information. And it was just behind the scenes magic that was going on. And so we had such a great time. So he had a young man coming up and work for him that was a YN3. And the YN3 was another young guy, go-getter, that was anxious to make a difference. Started out in a different department as a yeoman, which is what a YN is. He was also a great communicator, did a lot of great stuff. And he went to work for this department head in the admin office. And I could never figure out what kind of guidance he was getting from the department head, because he was doing everything. I mean, yeoman, there's certain tasks that you sort of presume that a yeoman's going to do, but this guy was doing everything. And to the point where I called him in one day, I said, I'm changing your rate. You are no longer a YN3, you're a GP3. And he looked at me, I said, GP stands for general purpose. You're doing everything that you need to do. So, and we got along. He did great work for me, and I appreciate he was just another mini-me from the admin officer in terms of getting all the, he had his trusted lines of communication. He had places that he could go and get useful data that if I went down, I probably wouldn't get the same level of data or level of information. So I asked him in an interview a week and a half ago, another reason why the Navy leadership ought to be doing what I've suggested and getting on talking to some of these folks. And I said, how did you come upon this mode of operation? And the department head basically had told him, hey, listen, your job is to take whatever task you have and get it done. I mean, do whatever you have to do. The tasks aren't necessarily going to be in your rate. They're certainly going to be all over the map in terms of responsibility. And if you need help, then you can come back to me and I'll get you whatever help you need. But I'm leaving it up to you to get this job done. And so the story that he got told by the department head was the message to Garcia. And it simply really says, given a task, use your brain and persistence to get it done. Given a task, use your brain and your persistence to get it done. It's worth a read. This is a true story, the message to Garcia. You find it online. It's not long. There's a couple of summations to it, and you'll understand how that message applies. What's really cool about this story is that the GP3 then took this same mode of operation when he got out of the Navy and applied it to his civilian life, working for a large aerospace company, and had a fairly important job as an assistant, I guess, or an EA if you want. And he did the same thing in that company, without whatever task he had, but more importantly, he was out on every level of this very complex, very rigid company, finding out the information that his boss needed, even if it was sort of like superfluous in the sense that it wasn't right on topic, but it would apply to the topic. And so he could go and do those sorts of things. And he became a rock star because most people were used to fairly rigid areas of lines of responsibility. He specifically asked if he could do the job the way in which he did it when he was with us on Carl Vinson. I want to go back and tell you a story that's even older than this because it was just sort of it was cool. When I had my squadron, we a helicopter squadron in 1989, 88, 89, and we were embarked on an aircraft carrier. And you know, helicopter squadrons were we weren't treated as second-class citizens, but we were not in the top tier in terms of, you know, winning awards for best squadron, for example, or what have you. Matter of fact, I had never been part of a helicopter squadron that had ever done that. And so, you know, we took that back, and you know, the leadership team in the squad that I had, and we just decided, without making a big deal about it, we were gonna just, you know, go about telling all of our people that greatness, perhaps as a collective, might be defined to be the first helicopter squadron to go up in front of the rest of the air wing and receive the end of deployment squadron award, which we did. But we did some phenomenal things that weren't done because we wanted to win this award. Remember, it's not about awards, but it became sort of a mindset. And the mindset, for example, was after the USS Iowa explosion. You know, we had 8 helicopters on board the ship. The air wing, the air boss asked how many could we have in the air in 30 minutes. And I said, well, we can have 8. I didn't even ask my maintenance officer if we could get 8 in because I didn't know what the status was. He was looking at me, so he knew what I said. And I said, but 4 of them are in the hangar bay. You got to get them up to the flight deck, which they did. 30 minutes later, we had 8 helicopters in the air helping provide relief to the Iowa and her crew. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And these young men and women, I bet you they all remember this story, and they were high-fiving each other. I was high-fiving them. We were getting high-fives from everybody. And it's a way you can create an environment that maybe you're not, all right, you know, here's where we're at. You know, from a collective, this is who we are. And but we want to be a little bit up and to the right. So that's where we're going to go. So that's what we're able to do. So this is really about that urgency, right? And the urgency piece of this is going to come into play in a variety of different ways that we're going to talk about. Some of the leadership venues that are mannerisms that go about doing what we want to go do. And it has to do with, you know, from a knowing who your followers are and then knowing who you are both. I mean, they're both important parts of this. The knowing who you are is actually sometimes just as difficult as knowing who they are. And the whole piece of this, and being decisive and liberating your talent, liberating these people's talent, is absolutely critical to what we do. It is, it's the best part of this, when you can have somebody recognize that they are better today than they were yesterday. And that's what I got out of every one of the interviews I've done so far. And I've done others as well. I just try to keep these little discussions to 30 minutes, and I'm going to be running out of time. But I'm having some great conversations with them. I'll include some others as we go on and have future discussions. But boy, I love these people, man. They are so good, and I love their families. You know, I watch what's on a lot of good leadership going on right now. Some of it shows up on some of the social media, just empowering, you know. But even with that, you know, what we're missing in those equations are, you know, how'd they get here? Who are they? I mean, really, who are they internal, and where do they want to go? And that piece has got to continue to be addressed if we're going to retain and build a stronger, more cohesive Navy. That's it for tonight. I could talk forever, but I'm going to try to keep it to 30 minutes. Got my 3,500 meters in the pool today, going back tomorrow. Anyone want to join me, let me know. I'll find a pool. We go swimming. You know, I love doing this. I hope you're enjoying it. And if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. Yeah, you can do it through YouTube. You can do it through hcharger70@gmail.com, which is my email. Yeah, and I'll respond. Have a great night. Love you. God bless America, and God bless all those service people who are on the wall for us this good night, taking care of business for the United States and for the world. Bye-bye.